Today I am going to go over the answers to the homework that was set last week. So feel free to adapt any of the work that you have completed or take notes during my presentation. Okay, I'll start by going over the format of the question in your homework. So this question is in the style of an exam question. Where you're firstly asked to identify the two artworks by two different artists that you've been studying in class. And part A is to write about these two artworks by commenting on the three selected visual elements, which are always different. The second part of part A is to talk about the visual impact of the painting and the one that you think has the most visual impact, and to justify your answers. So this is really opinion based. And then part B is to pick an artist from part A and write about the social and cultural events that influence their work. So we should know by now that the two artworks by two different artists that we've been studying in class have been Self-Portrait Along the Borderline Between Mexico and the United States by Frida Kahlo and Brother Wilfred by Peter Howson. Okay, so with this question, you're being asked to comment on the three visual elements of composition, texture, and mood and atmosphere. So with this question, what you need to know is what to look for when you're asked about a specific visual element. So with these three in particular, composition, you're being asked to write about how the objects in the painting are placed out. So you could be specifically looking for things like the focal point. Is there leading lines in the painting? Is there rule of thirds in the painting? Is it a busy or minimal composition? So that means, is there a lot of stuff in it, or is it quite minimal? You could be talking about viewpoints, if there's a specific perspective in it. For texture, you were talking about the surface feeling of the painting, how it looks like it would feel. So these are things like if it's shiny, bumpy, rough, smooth. And for mood and atmosphere, you are being asked how the painting makes you feel when you look at it. So does it make you feel happy, calm, scared? Is it humorous, or is it quite tense, or is it quite calm? So with this question, we need to know what we're looking for when we are asked for a specific visual element. Okay, so we'll start with the first visual element of composition, so what is in the painting and how is it arranged. We'll start by looking at the painting by Frida Kahlo. So one of the more sort of important points you could be talking about in this painting is that it is divided in two. So again, if we are thinking about how to structure our answer, we could be using our P chains. So firstly, we have the point of the painting is composed symmetrically, divided vertically into two halves. So evidence, so where can we see this in the painting? Well, on the left hand side, Kahlo has painted rural Mexico, and on the right hand side, she has painted an industrial USA. You could even go on to talk about how Kahlo herself, as she's in the middle of the painting, could be representing the border of Mexico. And lastly, to make sure that we are talking about the effect of this, we use the explain part of our P chain, and we could say that this represents her conflicting feelings towards living in the USA and missing her homeland of Mexico. A second point you could make about the composition of the painting by Frida Kahlo is that there is both a cluttered and uncluttered composition depending on what side you are looking at. So your point could be that on the right hand side, the American side, has more objects in it, which makes it a busier composition compared to that of the Mexico side. And where can we see that in the painting? Well, the objects on the USA side seem to be more pushed forward and also use up the space, whereas the objects on the Mexican side are less cluttered, they're more spaced out, which then enables the viewer to see from the foreground and the middle ground and the background. This is effective as it could represent the busier, more hectic lifestyle that Frida Kahlo was living in the USA compared to that she would live in Mexico. Another point that you could make about the composition of the painting by Frida Kahlo is that she has made herself the focal point of the painting. So the focal point is the area of the painting that the artist wants you to look at. So how she has done this is by emphasising her prominence in a bright pink dress, which contrasts the darker colours that are around her. And this is effective as a similar colour has been used in the plants and vegetation in the Mexican side of the painting. So this is her way of linking her with the Mexican side of the painting and showing us where it is that she really wants to be. Okay, so we'll move on to look at the composition of Brother Walfrid by Peter Howson. And similar to the last point there about Frida Kahlo, Peter Howson has made Brother Walfrid himself the focal point of the composition. And this is made clear by his central position and the fact that he is the largest figure in the piece. And this is effective as it signifies Brother Walfrid's importance and it makes the viewer look directly at him. A second point that you could make about the composition of Brother Walfrid is that there is a circular composition created by the figures surrounding Brother Walfrid, who is the main subject. So this helps to lead the eye around the painting to the image of Jesus on the cross in the background. And this is effective as it further emphasises the religious theme of the painting. Okay, so moving on to the second visual element that you were asked to write about, which is texture. And again, we're looking back at the painting by Frida Kahlo. So Frida Kahlo uses a variety of different textures in this painting, and again, it's dependent on what side of the painting you're looking at and the sort of communication that she is trying to give about that side of the painting. So our point for this could be Frida Kahlo uses a variety of textures from left to right in the painting. So we can see this in the differences in the textures from the vegetation and the plants on the Mexican side compared to that of the machinery and the sort of barren inorganic soil on the USA side. And this is effective again because it shows the differences between the two nations, where she is communicating how more in touch Mexico is with the earth and how America contrasts to that and is more modern and industrialised. A point that you could have made about texture in the Peter Howson painting is that the surface texture of the painting looks to be smooth due to the highly blended technique that Peter Howson uses to apply his paint. This is particularly evident in Brother Walfrid's face, and this is effective as it helps to create the sort of lines and wrinkles on Brother Walfrid's face, which suggests his age. Okay, so moving on to the last visual element then, which is mood and atmosphere. And again, looking back at the painting by Frida Kahlo. So I think the more important point to talk about when we're talking about this painting and mood and atmosphere is that there is an overall patriotic feel to the painting. We can see this in many different areas of the painting. We can see it in the Mexican flag that she's holding. We can see it in the traditional Mexican dress that she's wearing. We can see in the variety of the use of colour that she uses from left to right of the painting, where in the Mexican side, where the plants and vegetation is in the foreground, the colours are a lot happier and brighter. They link in with the colour of her dress. Compared to that of the other side, where the colours are a lot darker and bland, and not a lot really going on over there in the USA side. So this, again, if we're talking about the effect, it's effective because it shows the admiration Frida Kahlo has for our home country. Another point that you could have made for mood and atmosphere is that there's a feeling of uneasiness that can be felt by the viewer when looking at this painting. And this is caused by the deadpan emotionless expression on Kahlo's face. It almost feels as though Kahlo is staring right through you. She's looking right at you. It's quite uneasy. And again, the explanation for this, to explain the effect of this in her face, is that it lets the viewer feel the uneasiness that Frida Kahlo is feeling at this time of painting the painting, and how she would have been feeling being stuck between the two countries and the two worlds. And again, it's just communicating the conflicting feelings that she's having at that time. So the point to make for the mood and atmosphere in the Brother Wilfrid painting is that there is an overall desperate and frightening mood to the painting, and this is created by the low-key colours and dark tones used throughout, and this is effective because it conveys the desperation that the Irish immigrants would have been feeling at that time. A second point that you could have made for Brother Wilfrid in regards to mood and atmosphere is that there is the atmosphere of poverty in the painting. This can be seen in the unkempt or very little clothing that is being worn by the figures that are surrounding Brother Wilfrid. And this is effective because it conveys the desperation and actually how poverty-ridden that they were. Okay, so moving on to part B of question 1, where you're asked to pick an artist from part A and write about the social and cultural events that influence their work. So we are really talking about the artists specifically here, and the events and things that are happened in the artists' lives that have caused them to create the artwork that they do. So it's more about the artists' lives and the events surrounding their lives that have made the work that they've made. It's not really about describing the paintings so much in this question. So Frida Kahlo, for an example, was majorly influenced by Mexican traditional art, and she often painted oil on tin, which is a Mexican technique, and on the border is painted in that way, so that is how something that she's influenced by has created the artwork that she's made. Secondly, Frida painted on the border while she was with her husband in the USA. In this time, she suffered a miscarriage, she suffered the loss of her mother, and this really heightened a disconnection to her homeland, and really made her feel isolated and in limbo between the two countries. So again, that is an influence that has caused her to create that painting. And then if we're being more specific about the painting, we could be talking about the specific symbolism and stuff that is in the painting, the specific objects that are in the paintings that are symbolic of what was going on in Frida Kahlo's life at that time. And that could be the sort of contrast between the rural Mexico imagery and the more industrial USA imagery. It could be talking about the imagery of pollution in the painting. It could be talking about how she's holding the Mexican flag and how her dress links with the colours in the plants. But all these things can be mentioned about the painting as long as it links back to the stuff that was happening in Frida Kahlo's life at that time. So again, Peter Howson, we're talking about the things that have happened in Peter Howson's lives, or the things that he's influenced by that have caused him to create Brother Walfrid, or the style of painting that he creates. So the painting Brother Walfrid is clearly influenced by religion. We can see that by Brother Walfrid himself being in the painting, and he is a Marist brother. Also, there's a depiction of Christ on the cross in the background of the painting. And you could talk about how Howson grew up in a religious family, and also how he turned to Christianity after suffering a breakdown. Also, how Brother Walfrid was the founder of Celtic Football Club, and that is why Peter Howson uses the colour green so heavily in the painting. And you could also talk about how Celtic Football Club was founded to help the poverty-stricken Irish immigrants in Glasgow. You could even link that back to how Peter Howson is Scottish, but again, it's just making sure that we're going back to the life events of Peter Howson when we're talking about things in the painting. And then lastly, Peter Howson is heavily influenced by the brutal and harrowing realities that he faced when he was a war artist in the Bosnian Civil War in 1993. So this has influenced a lot of his paintings, and that's why they almost have quite a dark theme to his paintings. And in Brother Walfrid in particular, you can see the influence in the sort of dark, harrowing, desperate facial expressions on the figures surrounding Brother Walfrid, and the colours that Peter Howson has used in the painting is all very quite dark. Okay, so question 2 then is an unseen question, which means that you are being asked about any random painting or artwork that you will have never seen or studied before in class. So this again is similar to an exam question, where you would be asked to comment on any selected 3 of the 7 visual elements, again about how they are used effectively in the painting or artwork that you haven't seen. And then the second part of the question again is to give your justified overall opinion of the painting. So the painting that was selected for question 2 is Frostbitten by Andrew Wyeth. And yeah, so we're being asked to write about the mood and atmosphere. So as I said before, we're thinking about how does the painting feel? Is it happy, sad, scary, lonely, etc. So the first sort of impression with this painting is it's quite eerie. There is an overall sense of abandonment. Why is there rotting apples left on a windowsill? And it's a windowsill that looks quite old, unkempt, and a little bit dirty. So what we could say about this is our point could be that the overall mood and atmosphere of this painting is that of abandonment. Where you're seeing this in the painting is that the painting shows frostbitten, rotting apples left in front of an old, unkempt, closed window. And how is this use of the visual element effective? Well, the look of the wall and the window gives the impression that no one has lived there, the sort of old, unkempt window, but the presence of the apples suggests otherwise. So it's almost like a little glimpse of life in an almost abandoned sort of scene. So the second visual element was colour. So a point that you could make about the use of colour in this painting is that the artist has used contrasting colours, and this further symbolises or emphasises the feeling of abandonment. So the use of the really bright white silvery colour that is in the window contrasts with the really dark, dull, muted colours on the inside of the window and the wall around the window frame. Again, this is effective as bright white usually signifies or symbolises death, and this sort of ties in with that idea of abandonment, the look of the rotten apples, and that sort of old unkempt look of the painting. And lastly, looking at composition again, for this painting, if we're talking about the focal point, which has came up before with the other two paintings, you could say that the apples are the focal point of the painting. This has been created by the warm red colour of the apples contrasting against the duller colours around the window. And this is effective as it symbolises life present in quite an eerie, abandoned looking still life painting. Another point that you could have made about the composition of this painting is leading lines that lead you towards the focal point. So you can see with the framing of the windowsill and the lines in the wall, they all lead you towards the apples that are in the centre. There's also an element of looking out, looking in going on in this painting. So the window is there, but you're not actually looking out the window, you're looking inside the window. And this is further emphasising the composition of the painting and making you drawn to the apples on the windowsill. Another point that you could make about the composition of this painting is the idea of framing. So when we're talking about framing, we're really thinking about the idea of, say, a picture frame and what that does. So a picture frame surrounds a picture to make you look at the picture. So similarly in composition, framing is when there is a frame around an object that draws you into the centre and to the focal point.